Hello, everyone. It's Broodmeister again. I know it's been a very long time since I did one of these. In fact, I specifically remember saying in my last video on Metroid Dread that it was very unlikely that I was going to make a follow up and give my full thoughts on that game. And I never did. Long story short, it's probably my current favorite Metroid game. I've beat it at least 4 times on like every difficulty, speed running, getting all items. It's fantastic. But this isn't about that. Today, I just wanted to give my thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 3 while they're still fresh. For a bit of preamble, I suppose, to give my history with the series, Xenoblade is probably my favorite RPG series of all time. In fact, without question, it is. And it's one of my favorite Nintendo franchises, right up there with Metroid. My very first experience with it was Xenoblade X. I actually bought a Wii U specifically for this game because I saw the trailers and thought it was the coolest thing ever, and it was, and it desperately needs a port. Afterwards, my girlfriend was kind enough to give me her copy of Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, and I very much enjoyed it. Not quite as much as X, but the story was still fantastic. And then, very soon after I finished that, I believe, Xenoblade. That's Metroid. this one, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, was announced to be coming to Switch, so of course I made sure to get it, and it is probably my favorite game of all time, at least a contender. It's right up there with Sonic Adventure 2. I have put literally over 700 hours into this game if you factor in both the base game and the DLC. I beat both on both 100% in base game run and again on New Game Plus. I love it just that much. I have the oh god, it's taking too long. I have the special edition of every game in the series thus far that I was able to get. Oh Christ, this was a horrible and I even rebought the art book for 2, even though the special edition comes with one, just because I wanted the extra pictures that the reprinted one came with. So, more or less, my only purpose of this is to say that I'm a big loser that likes Xenoblade a lot, and of course I have definitive edition for this one too. I forgot to bring it up. So, needless to say, when Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was announced earlier this year, I was stupidly excited for it. Not quite as hyped as I was when 2 got announced, solely because there was such little time between its announcement and its actual release. I can't think of the last time a game had its release date pushed forwards instead of back. But here we are, and I have it. How did I lose it? I have it in my hands. I have it in my hands. I've completed it. I have almost 150 hours. I've done the main story, got all the heroes, done most of the side quests, including post-game stuff. There's a couple of annoying ones I haven't finished yet, but I'll get there soon. Point is, I think I've experienced enough of this game in order to express my thoughts on it. At least until the DLC comes out. That could change my opinion slightly. But until then... I'm recording this at 2 a.m., by the way. I thought I'd give my pure unadulterated thoughts, again, while they're still fresh and hot off the press, and while I still have the motivation to make this video, because God knows my motivation dies fast, if you can't tell by my infrequent posting on this channel. Anyway, so, this is going to be spoiler-free. I will talk about gameplay mechanics, so if you want to go on 100% blind and you don't want to hear anything about it, well, you probably shouldn't have clicked on this video hearing someone's impressions, but point is, I won't talk about any specific plot details or character things other than saying if I liked them or not, and like going into a little detail why I feel that way. But you don't got to worry about having the ending ruined or any significant character reveals or deaths or blah, 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 blah. I'm only going to be talking about things that you would experience yourself from the first couple of chapters. So, finally, with all that out of the way, what are my thoughts on Xenoblade Chronicles 3? It's pretty good. Yeah, it's a pretty good game. It's a great follow-up. However, I don't like it as much as 2. And I when I say that, I feel like it's a huge red flag for my other friends that are a fan of the series, because 2 has its problems. There's very many problems that are very apparent, but to me, its peaks are still the highest in the series. Like the lows do not compare to the highs that it reaches. And even if the other games in the series are more consistently good, I don't think that they're as great as 2 gets towards the end. 3 is certainly more consistent, but I very rarely, I'll say, had moments where I was on the edge of my seat in regards to the story. It's well written, don't get me wrong. It has a beautiful atmosphere from the very start. It's a much more melancholic, mature tone than I was expecting, even when compared to 1 and X, I would say. It was a lot more dire than I was anticipating, but that really goes to give its own identity that I thoroughly enjoyed. For the most part, I'll say some things that I thought clashed with it poorly later, but I love the new tone, the new direction. The cast is very likable. I wouldn't say anyone is like a crazy stand-up. Like, I love me Senna. She's the girl with the gall, blah 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 blah. Noah's pretty cool. Mio is the heart and soul of the game, but my main thing is that they work better as a unit than they do on their own. Like, every single character has their own arc in the game and little side story that is explored and fleshed out, but it really does feel like it's a small potatoes to the grand scheme of it all. That doesn't mean that they're poorly characterized. They're very well characterized and get a lot of interaction, and everyone is always contributing in some way, which is a problem that I have with Xenoblade 1, where it's usually just Shulk and Melia and the 7th party member, for the most part, that are really driving the plot, and then occasionally one person will cycle on and chip in for that chapter and then piss off to the back of your party. 3 does not have that problem at all. Everyone's constantly interacting, but if, like, the majority of their characterization comes through how they bounce off of each other, and they bounce off of each other very well. Uni's snark is a joy to behold. I love Lance's dumb meatheadedness and how easily agitated he is when other people poke fun at him for it. Tyon is a really funny straight man, and seeing him get flustered with the others' antics is great. And Senna's adorable. She's precious. I relate to her quite a bit when her inner struggles are explored. And Noah's just a cool dude, very empathetic. I think he's a great lead. But let's say if you plucked one of them out of their tight-knit group of 6 and you put him in any other Xenoblade game, I don't think they would stand out all that much. Like, maybe Uni would, because she swears so much. But like if you put Senna in 2, she could pass as like a rare blade, but I don't think she's gonna stand up to like Morag or Zeke or Rex. Yes, I know everyone hates Rex, but I adore him. Sue me. And I feel similarly about most of them, to be honest. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. 3 has very strong themes of, interconnectedness. I mean, there's a whole mechanic based on it, for Pete's sake. But it was still something that I had in my mind as I was going, and I noticed that I wasn't getting as invested with their individual narratives as I would have liked. Certainly not as much as I was in Xenoblade 2. That said, as for the story itself, I think it's pretty good. It's not bad by any means. However, it felt very rudimentary, for lack of a better word. Like, every single Xenoblade game always has like a crazy ass moment where it's a huge twist and it pulls the rug out from under you and it completely changes and recontextualizes everything. And then when you go on a second playthrough, it's like, oh my god, like if it's so obvious now, why didn't I see it before? And it's it's something that you can't expect, and it's really fun. And I feel like my playthroughs of every game, 1, X, and 2, were all defined by those moments of hype and mystery and intrigue. And with 3, didn't really have that, to be honest. Like, the events make sense. I like them. There's really good, strong emotional moments, but nothing caught me off guard going through it. Whenever there would be like a reveal of a certain character's identity, and instead of like Xenoblade 1 per se, where, not to go into spoilers, but where, certain characters show up that you weren't anticipating. It's like, whoa, holy fuck, like this changes everything. And 3, when someone shows up that you weren't, well, I guess I was expecting them. Or even if I wasn't, I was just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, that works within the established rules that this game is setting up. So it wasn't bad, but I always felt more like I was just kind of pleasantly spectating than I was like sitting on the edge of my seat, like gripping my chest, like I gotta know what happens next. Up until chapter 5. Chapter 5 of Xenoblade 3, I think, might be one of, if not the best single chapter in any of the Xenoblade games, and I don't say that lightly by any means, because again, I freaking love this series to death. The fact that it trended on Twitter for a whole week, it speaks volumes in and of itself. I had no idea why. I just kept seeing chapter 5. I was like, I gotta play faster. And then I got there, and I got it. And that, hats off to you, Monolith Soft. You guys really pulled off a good thing there. And the ending as well might be the strongest ending out of any of the games. The fact that I bawled my eyes out the first time I saw it, and then the very next morning I replayed the cutscene and I cried even harder. Like, it hit me even more the longer I've stayed away from the game after beating it. The fact that it's constantly in my mind every single day now, and it's impacted how I look at my own life, I think speaks volumes of how well written it was and how resonant the core message of the game is. And I don't want to take that away from Monolith Soft. There's a lot of great callbacks in this game, a lot of cool directions that it goes in, so the story is not by any means bad. I just wanted more. Also, very short by Xenoblade standards. If I wasn't so caught up with side quests, I think I probably could have beat this game in like 60, 70 hours, which again, not a short amount of time by any means. That's a great RPG game, definitely worth 80 Canadian bucks, 60 bucks everywhere else, I guess. But for Xenoblade 1 and 2, they both took me like 90 something hours to beat on my first try, and that was doing minimal side quests. Like, I did ones that came my way. With 3, I felt pretty much compelled to do every single side quest, which has its pros and cons, as I'm about to get into now. So the side quests in 3 are really cool because for all the major side quests related to the hero mechanic, they are much like Blade quests in Xenoblade 2. They're all fully voiced, but now they are almost intrinsically tied to the core plot of the game. A lot of them just happen. Like, some you got to go out of your way for, but quite a few of them you'll sort of run into on the main quest, and either you have to finish it before continuing with the story, or they'll be like, we're going to go over here and you can choose to follow us, or you can keep doing the main story. But because of how important they feel and how they actually carry on plot threads from the main story, at least me personally, I felt like I had to do them. And a lot of them are quite good. I enjoyed the majority of them, and getting new heroes to add to your party was always a treat. It's a great reward. It's a nice sort of evolution of Blades from 2. However, it's because of how important they feel. Uh, how do I put this? It feels like parts of the main story are just chopped off and designated as a side quest arbitrarily so that there's more content to do. Like, quite a few hero quests in 2 contain, like, information that is essential for backstory or lore or character building, not just for the heroes, but for the main cast, that otherwise you would get zero answer for in the main story. I guess on one hand you can say, well, you're not going to want to skip it, like you want to get the heroes to add to your party. And the director of the game is flat out like encouraged people like, hey, if you see a question mark on the map, make sure you go do it. It's worth it. And I agree. It is worth doing it. I love the hero system. I love them. A lot of their quests are quite good. But because it feels like a portion that was just cut off and set to the side, it kills the pacing of the game. Like, even those times where I was on the edge of my seat and I was deeply invested, like after the end of chapter 5, I felt myself having to stop and say, okay, better go do a hero quest, because I don't know if any of these are missable. I don't know if a city's going to blow up or something and then I can't do those quests anymore. I want to do all of them and make sure that I have as many cool additions to my party as possible. But because of that, I was stopping for like 10, sometimes 20, 30 hours just to do side quests, even though I just want to know what the hell happens next in the story. And this could just be a me problem. I'm sure there's plenty of people that aren't as compelled to do everything that they can on their first go. But to me, now that they felt like mandatory as opposed to a fun bonus, it felt like a slog to get through them as they went on. And it doesn't help that quite a few of them start getting repetitive, just because they recycle the same group of antagonists from the main game, and seeing them over and over and over again without much change to their personality or their goals or backstories, it kind of boils them down and makes them feel like piss easy cartoon villains with no depth to them. And that really impacted my view of the villains as a whole in the main story. Because, and I hate to say it, I think Xenoblade 3 has the worst villains in the series. X doesn't... Maybe not X. I don't know. X... I'm gonna withdraw from commenting on comparing them to X. But at least when compared to the main series, to 1 and 2, 3's villains ain't got shit on them, man. Like, the main villains, the one that only appear in the story and not the recycled side quest ones that all feel like the same person, they're okay, I guess. Like, N is pretty good. Got a cool backstory, cool design, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Can't say too much about him without spoilers, but he's no Jin, he's no Ego, and the main villain of the game, I enjoy what he represents. It's a cool concept, but in terms of characterization, I just wasn't really feeling it whatsoever, and especially not his underlings, which they didn't. Without getting into it, the game just doesn't give a fuck about giving them anything, and it really sucked my enjoyment out of a lot of cutscenes, because again, in 1 and 2, there's so many cool villains for the protagonist to bounce off of that are constantly proactive in the plot, and they have great chemistry and banter, and every time you fight them is more exciting than the last. And you don't get that in 3. Even like the core villains, again, like say N or some other people that I won't name, you'll fight them and then they'll just leave for like 2 or 3 chapters. And the whole time you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to see them again. I can't wait to see what they're up to. And then by the next time you see them, it's the last time, and it's so disappointing. So I think that's probably the aspect of 3 that let me down the most, aside from, again, the poor pacing of the side quests. But I know that I've been quite critical here, but I do want to get into the positive now because, like I said, I love this game. I still think it's a really good game. These are just the sort of issues that plagued my mind during it. So, start off with positives finally. Going back to the heroes. While their quests can get a bit repetitive and gunk up the pacing of the game, hero system is genius. It takes the blades from 2, removes the gotcha, just makes them easily obtainable permanent party members that all have direct ties to the actual world of the game and other characters. And they do really cool things with them. And what's great is that once you add them to your party, not only are they an extra party member, but any character can get their class. So you get kind of cool character builds, like in Xenoblade X, which was really fun to experiment with. The whole game, I was just switching classes on each character to try them all out, and that never stops being fun. It was the same sort of rush that I got from getting new blades in 2, only without the frustration of grinding for 30 hours just to get Cosmos, which, yes, I did. I got every single blade in 2, and it wasn't easy or fun. But with heroes, I always did want to go get them. And I think that speaks volumes about how great they are. I say speaks volumes a lot. I'm sorry for that. The combat itself, while not as good as 2 for certain small nitpicks, I still think is really addictive. You have a huge pool of arts to have access to. Your regular 3 arts, and then your 3 arts that you can learn from other classes that you gain. And then you can combine those into fusion arts. When you interlink with your characters, you get another 3 arts, and then there's your talent arts. There's just a lot of stuff. Now you can switch between characters mid-combat, which it blew my mind when I realized this is the first game to allow you to do that, because it seemed like such an obvious feature that would come in handy. But God, was it hard going back to the other games. I played them a little afterward to get a feel, see how I prefer the combat and all that. And it is just such a nifty feature. It's so slick, it's so quick. If any of the AI are not doing what you want them to, it's an easy course correction. But to be honest, the AI are usually doing exactly what they need to. They are so finely tweaked in 3 that there's rarely a chance that they will ever fuck up when you need them to do. It's gotten to the point where, say, if you have enough characters with combo arts, like say you want to go for a daze or a smash, your AI characters, without you even needing to initiate it with a break, will just go ahead and do a full combo within the first 10 seconds of a fight, if you build them smart enough, which on the one hand is crazy awesome and exhilarating, and it makes you feel really empowered. But it also gets to a point where it's almost too broken, because they will always do the optimal thing. It can allow you to coast on them a lot more. So if you're playing on normal difficulty, the game quickly gets very imbalanced because your party members are always doing the right thing. Chain attacks build very quickly and are super easy to break once you get a hang of it. And then once you build up your interlink, if you get all of your characters to level 3, unless you're fighting like a high-level unique monster, you can demolish just about anyone, bosses included, by getting them all to level 3 and just spamming your full-powered talent arts. It is ridiculous. It is fun, but I will say endgame feels like there's quite a bit less depth because of how that same strategy works every single time. Whereas in 2, you're constantly thinking, am I going to use a driver combo? What blade combo can I do? You have to keep track of what elemental orbs you've already made and which ones you're capable of making next. In chain attacks, the order of your characters is very important because you have to make sure you break the elemental orbs as you go, but how fast do you want to break them, etc., etc., etc. Um, Another change to three's combat that I'm not sure how I feel about is that now reviving a party member does not take away from your party gauge. It is something that any healer can do at any time. The only thing is that it just takes a few seconds rather than being an instant revive. At first, I really didn't like it because I thought it, for one, made it so that you always need a decent amount of healers in your party, or else because if they die, then you're screwed and no one can revive anymore. But also because I felt like sacrificing the party gauge was a much more meaningful consequence, because you have to decide, is it worth bringing this person back right now, or do I want to get a chain attack and deal as much damage as possible and focus on bringing them back later? But when I started to think about how good the AI teammates are in this game, uh, and the fact that there's 6 characters, 7 if you include the hero, on map at once, if any of them could revive anyone with like no consequence other than bringing the party gauge, no one would be dead in your party for more than like half a second. So I can see why they changed that. And there is an item that you can obtain in the game that lets non-healer classes revive, which I only found out after beating the game, so that's an L on me. But yeah, so I'm mixed on it, but it definitely isn't a deal breaker or anything like that. Besides that, the world in the game is absolutely beautiful. It is massive, almost to a detriment. It didn't quite drive me insane because there are a lot of fast travel points. Every time you kill a unique monster, you can teleport right to their grave, which is very much appreciated. But for someone like me who feels the need to completely fill the square of a map, because otherwise I'll feel like I'm missing out on a secret potentially, it was very overwhelming and at times frustrating to be like, hey, I filled out the whole map, I guess I can progress. And then I look to the corner and there's a whole new section that's like the size of the entire map of Torna the Golden Country, or the Bionis' shoulder from Future Connected, which was both really cool and just exhausting after a point. I think the worst it gets is when you get to the open sea. That's the one part where I put my foot down and said, I am not going to just go over the entire ocean over and over again to fill this all out. I'll just find the important stuff. But it still isn't the worst. I do think it could have benefited from some sort of vehicle, maybe, or even if there was just like a proper sprint, like in Xenoblade X, and like a nicer jump. I think Xenoblade X sort of traversal options would have greatly benefited the world that 3 has. I get why, because X is a very different thing, and this is trying to be more in line with the regular games, but it was just something that plagued my mind as I went on. Beyond all of that, I think I've said my piece.
Wrong. I did not speak my piece. Here is a random assortment of other little comments I wanted to make about the game that I forgot last night. Really disappointing that Heart to Hearts are not in the game anymore. They've been a staple of the Xenoblade series, and I know that discussions are like the new replacement for them, but they don't hold a candle to it, especially when Heart to Hearts and Quiet Moments were fully voiced in Xenoblade 2 and Definitive Edition. This is a big step back, and it really let me down. That said, they do make up for it slightly with all of the new open world dialogue. Characters just talk a lot more in Xenoblade 3 out in the open, like unprompted by any quest or story moment or anything. You can be doing just a regular side quest or even just walking past a town or an area, and characters will speak up, and it including heroes or temporary party members, and it feels like there's always a unique piece of flavor text every time you go somewhere with someone, and sometimes they're actually like interesting plot or lore things that they just drop if a location means something to that character, which is really cool. That said, another trade-off is that the post-battle dialogue, there's nothing. Like, I seriously, it feels like there's like 4 tracks in the whole game, which is a big letdown. Again, when Xenoblade 2 had like an hour worth of post-battle dialogue between all the different characters in the party and the blades. In 3, I don't think there's even any post-battle dialogue with the heroes, or if there is, it just doesn't play frequently enough to stay in my mind. You just get the same, hear that, Noah? Lance wants something a bit meatier, or I'm the girl with the gall. If only you didn't run off on your own. Like, it feels like there's like 4 lines that get played. And I don't know if there just aren't any others, or if the game just recycles the same ones for whatever reason. But it's funny to meme on them, but it really does get grating after a while. Another thing about the combat that I didn't think would be a big deal, but really got on my nerves as it went on, is the removal of QuickTime events, which have been a staple since the first game, where, when you're using an art or a talent art or a chain attack, you have to press buttons at the right time in order to get the most damage. And you'd think it's not a big deal to take that out, or maybe even be beneficial. But when they're gone, there are times where you're just watching animations for like anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds with 0 input. And they're snazzy animations, don't get me wrong. Monolith Soft has some of the best cutscene and fight choreography in the industry. But when you're seeing the same repeated battle animations again and again with no input, it gets to the point where I can just leave my controller down in the middle of a chain attack and just watch, and it's not very engaging. And quite often I would find myself watching a YouTube video on the side just to keep myself entertained, because otherwise I just wasn't having all that much interactivity. I know this won't tickle everyone's fancy, but I hated gem crafting in 1. I just didn't bother because I didn't give a crap about the minigame, and I didn't want to put in the work to get the mobile gem crafter. It was just a big pain in the ass. I'm glad that gem crafting is simplified in 3. Now I actually took advantage of them, even though most of the time I didn't need to, because this game is piss easy. On that note, I briefly mentioned earlier that on normal the combat isn't really an issue, and that is also not helped by the fact that when you're doing so many side quests, you get just such an abundance of bonus EXP, and if you use it even once, even if you jump 5 levels ahead with bonus EXP, the game will basically never be balanced again unless you strictly adhere to only story content. It is so easy to get overleveled in Xenoblade 3, and I don't understand why they lock the ability to de-level yourself until after you beat the game. If that was in the base game, it would be no issue. And I know you can say, well, just switch to hard difficulty, but hard is the opposite problem, where you need to be several levels over the enemies to even stand a chance. If you're fighting a unique monster, make sure you're 10 or 15 levels over and have strong party composition, or you're just fucked. So it wasn't an end-all be-all fix, unfortunately. To end off on a positive note, though, one of the best things this game does is remove the field skills from Xenoblade 2. Everyone hated them. It always sucked to have specific blades in your party that are really strong in a certain thing that you always need to keep equipped in order to do basic things to travel the world. It gets better, once you know what you're doing and have a wide variety of blades, but on your first playthrough, it'll grind you to a halt for sometimes 5 hours just trying to get the right blade for the job. In 3, that's no issue. There's only 4 traversal skills, and you always get them when you need them to progress. They only unlock certain side paths that you otherwise couldn't get to. If it's ever a roadblock directly in your way, you're going to get the skill immediately after you discover it, which is very nifty. I will say that because they're always so mandatory for the moment, they feel a little cheap in some regard, but better that they leave no impression on me than they drive me crazy like the field skills in 2 did. So props to you, Monolith Soft.
What else is there about 3 that I didn't mention? Oh, music. No shit, the music is incredible. I don't think the team has ever missed on a single Xenoblade game, and this might be the best soundtrack. I don't know. 2 is really good. X is really different, but also fantastic. but God, the flutes in this game go so hard. I never thought that instrument could be so incredible, and it mixes so great with the piano and the guitar and the violins that you've come to expect from Xenoblade. The music also works really well with the plot. There's lots of great event music, and the core theme of the Offseer's flutes is worked into crucial scenes in really amazing ways that had me just bawling my eyes out. I felt a little emotion there just thinking about it. But that's a no-brainer. Xenoblade never disappoints when it comes to music. Beyond that, I think that's about all I have to say. Like I said, it's a very good game. It did disappoint me in a few aspects. There are a few things about it that just drive me crazy, like the repetition of side content and the broken pacing. But the story's still strong, even if it didn't surprise me. The cast is really lovable. Gameplay is quite good, even if it's not, the gameplay loop isn't quite as addictive as X or 2 for me. And it did leave me wanting more rather than less, which I think is a good thing. And thankfully, there is DLC coming. That is one thing that I have to absolutely make clear. This is not a finished game. Well, it's finished in the sense that like the main content, like I'm satisfied with the core content, but there's more to come, more heroes, more story. And if the DLC expansion is anywhere near as good as Torn of the Golden Country, my thoughts on this game could improve greatly. I already have hopes and dreams of what I hope the DLC might be, but I won't know until next year, most likely. So hey, if it's amazing or terrible, maybe I'll be motivated enough to get off my ass and actually make a follow-up for once, unlike Metroid Dread. So we shall see when that day comes. But yeah, that's about it. I am terribly sorry if this is rushed or if I've been very quiet. Like I said earlier, I'm recording this at 2 a.m. just because I wanted to get my thoughts out. There are a few times where I crapped out because I heard my roommate go out of his room to like get something from the fridge. So forgive me, and forgive me as well, Mateo, if I woke you up. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for sitting through this very long and very rambly video, just getting my thoughts out. Hopefully I will be able to do more things like this in the future. I want to be able to beat the crap out of my productivity problems, but we shall see, as I always say. Thank you once again, and have a great night or day or afternoon. I don't know when you're watching this. This is when I'm recording it. Peace.